That's how Martin Lawrence used to start his show on WZUP. Any Martin fans out there? Anyway, welcome to the X-Man. Holla at your boy, Doc Coyle. I am not Martin Lawrence, unfortunately. This is episode 7 of the X-Man, and it's holiday time, you know. Or as we in Trump's America, we can say Christmas now. I'm so happy. Didn't say Christmas for 8 years. Now I can come out the closet. I'm not a religious person, but I do like Christmas. I like the lights. I hung up a Christmas tree, and I enjoy it. And I don't need Jesus for that, guys. I'm sorry. Sorry for the Jesus lovers out there. I love you guys. You know, I love Jesus too, even though I don't pray to him. I'm cool. The fact, you know, I like his beard, robes, seem real comfortable all the time. Water into wine. I'm cool. Who doesn't like a good miracle from time to time? Anyway, the holiday season, you know, it's interesting. I've been, you know, your boy Doc's been in a little bit of a, I don't know, down in the dumps, a little slump, a little mini holiday or say seasonal depression. But I don't think that's the worst thing. You know, sometimes you get down and it allows you to look inside, you know, and I think that's okay. You know, to kind of just take stock, say, hey, why am I in a bad mood? Why am I upset? And you can do some work on yourself. And I think that's helpful. I think some of it has to do with the climate. You know, I'll get up early. I haven't been getting up early. I've been kind of sleeping in, guys. I'm sorry. But I've been getting up late and then working late, all right? I'm getting in at both ends. But, you know, you get up, you look on the old Twitter there, and you hear about all the terrible things going on, you know, and it puts you in a way that's not great. So maybe sometimes, y'all, we got to turn off the social medias. There's a lot of negativity out there. You know, you can focus on all that stuff or you can ignore it, you know, which I think I'm going to do, guys. I'm done with reading and listening, and I'm just going to live in blissful, everlasting ignorance. It's going to be glorious. No, probably not, unfortunately. Real quick, I just want to plug the upcoming Vegas Nerve West Coast tour. It's really a tour of Southern California, but we finally have some dates. So right now we have January 16th, which is a Monday, at Loaded in Hollywood, and that'll be featuring the band Scum Love and Fake Figures, with also featuring Travis from Atreyu. January 18th, which is the Wednesday, we'll be playing Skinnies in North Hollywood, opening for the rock band Karaoke, which would be awesome. Then January 19th, we'll be playing Blacklight District Lounge in Long Beach, California. The 20th is actually an invite-only show in Orange County associated with NAMM, so really not too much need in advertising that one. And then also January 21st, which is a Saturday, we'll be playing Brick by Brick in San Diego, and we'll be opening up for Silver Snakes and Ages. So this is our first Vegas Nerve tour, so please check it out. And if you're in town for NAMM, we're going to be playing a bunch that week, so come on out. We'd love to see you. So now I'm going to talk about this week's sponsor. It is a band from Japan called Death I Am. And although the singer is from the States, and I say that, guys, this is some fucking heavy shit. This song is called Calculating Fate, and it's from their self-titled album. Check it out. Damn, that shit was dope, especially that end part. You know what I'm saying? Your boy's gonna open up a circle pit up in my room up in here. That shit was dope, man. Yeah, so that was Death I Am from their self-titled album. The track is called Calculating Fate. And if you dig that, you can check them out. Their website is deathiam.com, and they're on Twitter at deathiam2. I really want to thank those guys for sponsoring the show. And if you would like your band or your product to sponsor the show, hit up Doc Coyle on social media. I'm easy to find. You know, I'm not going to give you my email address because I don't trust you people. Going to be sending me viruses. You want to be hacking me like Podesta. You know what I'm saying? You ain't going to hack me. Actually, no, seriously, please don't hack me, guys. I would prefer that not to happen. I'm as soft digitally as I am in real life. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to get into squabbles. Anyway, let's get into our guest coming up. We have Mr. Mike Gitter. This man is A&R, artist in repertoire. I think that's what it stands for. You know, you think all these years in the business, I would know. Yes, he has worked at Atlantic Records. He has worked at Roadrunner Records for quite some time. He was at Razor and Tie. Now he's at Century Media / Another Century. This guy, if you know heavy music, he is a bit of a legend, you know, as far as I'm concerned. He's been there, has been part of the punk and hardcore and underground and independent music scenes, and has even really affected how our dirty little underground scene has penetrated into the mainstream. So I really want this show to start capturing and talking to people in the industry side of things and not just musicians and artists, because I want to provide a platform to give people like me, musicians out here trying to make it, some insider education on what happens, you know, behind the scenes to make these great careers and the ones that last. And that's really what I'm interested in, not necessarily the big flash in the pan that happens in a few minutes. So anyway, enjoy my talk with Mike Gitter. I want to welcome our guest, Mr. Mike Gitter, A&R extraordinaire. He is one of the big gets, the guys on my list that I wanted to get, because some people think this show is just about band members, and it's not really about that. It's about the creative world, the professional creative world. And I think people like you, in a way, the world I come from, the musicians, and especially like people who haven't had the success and the access I have, you know, you're like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They don't really know. You know, I know you don't see it that way, but I completely don't see it that way.
Well, of course you don't, because you're you. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of musicians probably look at it like in Wayne's World. It's like Mr. Big from Big Time Records, or is what some people call the Suits. As if I've ever seen an A&R person or someone wearing a suit.
Yeah, well, at least in the metal world, I don't know.
I mean, I've seen some record company executives wearing fine suits.
Fine suits, not even off the rack, like serious.
Yeah, we're not talking like Nordstrom's, you know, discount
Listen,
house.
I went to Nordstrom's, and it was in L.A. at the Grove, which is very expensive, and it was not cheap there.
No. True.
But that's also by Beverly Hills, so keep that in mind.
True. No, but I think it's interesting because everybody has their, you know, I think what a lot of what you're talking about in your podcast in general anyway is we all have everybody has a journey. And I think everyone has a very, you know, different journey. And, you know, I think one of the things that's interesting that you're covering are people who have longevity.
Yeah.
And who have who have sort of, who've carved out their own, you know, swath through whether it be culture, whether it be music, whether it be the arts, and you know, and I think that for all of us, we're really no different. It's just I think it's a lot about just taking, about putting energy into motion. And, you sometimes, you do that as a younger person, and you get, it's surprising where you find yourself several years later.
Well, I would say this program is an environment for the lifers.
Yep.
The people that no matter what we kind of get involved in, somehow we get drawn back. And even if, and I know people, musicians and people who have been involved in the industry side who have completely left the business, but there's still a part of them that's still connected and will always be there. But speaking of lifers,
okay.
So you got your start doing music journalism?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically.
Around what time?
Well, in the most primitive and do-it-yourself manner. In 1983, well, actually, no. Around 1982, I caught the fanzine bug. And that was a direct result of discovering the cure to Loverboy and Styx and Boston and all that music that we kind of love now, but we knew wasn't that cool back then.
Yeah.
I discovered punk rock.
What do you think is the thing that makes someone like you not only want to be a fan, but then take part? Because there's something very like activist about doing a DIY zine. What was it? Oh, I want to get free records. I want to get into shows, or I just want to be closer.
I think it's all of the above. I think it's energy. I think some kids put it into sports. Some people put it into music. Some people put it into the stamp collecting club. And for me, I realized that I probably wasn't, going to be the best musician.
Did you play at all?
Yeah, I played. I was in two different bands around 1986 through 88. They were both atrocious.
What did you play?
I did the awful embarrassing thing.
You sang?
Yes.
Did you sing or scream? Did you punk rock grunt?
Basically, the two bands were both failed attempts to sound a lot like music that was coming out of Washington, D.C. at the time. I think both bands were sort of modeled on a band called Dag Nasty.
Okay.
Which was kind of a bridge between old hardcore or old first generation hardcore and something more melodic and something more something more was probably more tuneful and memorable. Mm-hmm. And there were bands who did it that were phenomenal at it. And it's everything from Dag Nasty themselves to, a great New Jersey band that nobody remembers anymore called American Standard. To
even that one's over my head. And I'm from Jersey.
American Standard was a fantastic band. So yeah, both the band. One band was called Apology, and we made a record for the Wishing Well label, and it was it's got about one good song on it, and in terms of the musical direction of the band, it was wildly divergent between all the different members. I sort of wanted to go into more sort of hardcore or what at the time was called emo core direction, not to be confused with
screamo or
even the post Dashboard Confessional emo of the day. It was sort of a failed attempt at that. It kind of sounded like an edgier local rock and roll band. Mm-hmm. And that was followed up by a band called Grin, which actually wasn't terrible. And I think if we lasted longer than a year, we would have probably ended up being a pretty okay version of that kind of band. One of the good things about playing in both those bands is we did because I knew people from putting out a fanzine and also booking and promoting shows in the Boston area. We got to play with some pretty cool bands. We got to play with the Descendants. We got to play with Fugazi. We got to play with Verbal Assault. We got to play with a lot of bands from Washington D.C.
So you were involved.
Yeah. I mean, because that's what you did. Like that's how you applied your energy.
So was it a situation kind of like a teacher, like those who can't become journalists or become on the industry side, or not even can't do, but maybe not due to the level of your standards, perhaps?
Those who can't rock with authority can write with authority.
Right on.
Or promote with authority.
Yeah.
So.
One thing I think that really interests me is going back and looking at some of the bands you've worked with, is that you're a common aesthetic from at least the Atlantic days to the Roadrunner days is this affinity with the hardcore scene, with a punk scene. Do you still feel like you are a hardcore person, a punk person? Is that generally what you identify with, or is that putting it too simply, being a grown man?
Well, I think you are who you are, and you have the background that you do, and you learn life lessons in a certain context, and why deny your own history? Mm-hmm. That said, have the courage, have the ambition to step outside your niche, to learn things, to progress both as a person, in your chosen vocation, I love music, and I would hate to be stuck working on one kind of record or working with one kind of music exclusively.
Well, let's talk about your entry point. So at Atlantic, you signed or worked with bands like Bad Religion, Jawbox, Sam I Am, Civ, Orange 9mm. Mm-hmm. Now, those are all bands that I would say is part of the hardcore scene, punk scene.
Totally connected, yeah.
So that was definitely your entry point. That was your reference. That was your world.
Yeah, I got my. Basically, I was hired by Atlantic, because I was a journalist, and again, everything is a journey, and I think everything is ultimately connected, and a lot of the things I was covering as a journalist were bands like Helmet, the Rollins Band, Hole, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Beastie Boys, that band that the guy I know who was the drummer in a band called Scream played in, who stayed on my floor many times, called Nirvana.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah,
did they do something big?
Yeah, well, They did a little something.
So you were in that vibrant,
it was
what would soon to be known as grungy world, or the alternative music of the day.
Well, I think it was the tipping point of independent music.
Yeah.
To me,
where you couldn't keep it underground. After a certain point, it entered the mainstream world.
Well, I think that Nevermind was a tipping point that was bound to happen.
Yeah.
Especially when you have upwards of 20 years of a of sort of a very energized and passionate scene or demographic, making a lot of great records, touching a lot of lives, and then you start having bands that are the more palatable or mainstream or just culture shaping bands, from that world, or loosely affiliated bands, like I said, like the Chili Peppers, like Jane's Addiction, like the Rollins Band, Sonic Youth, being signed to major labels, and starting to seep out into the culture. Then, the year before Nirvana released Nevermind, you had Lollapalooza. And Lollapalooza basically organized a whole demographic.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you kind of have this burgeoning alternative nation looking for its voice.
120 minutes.
Totally.
that whole thing, and then you take the fashion component. You take the Reality Bites and singles and all those.
That was after that. That was
kind of a summary after the fact.
Yeah.
But do you?
That was an aftershock of.
So I was born in 80, so I was essentially coming of age in this era, and my viewpoint of it was obviously a little bit removed because I wasn't involved in the rock and punk and hardcore scene leading up to that. I don't know. I think I have really mixed emotions about nostalgia and kind of like back in the day thing. But one thing I am really interested in are these periods in time of importance that I wasn't there for. And so I use people like you to give me like a view, like, what was it like, man?
Well, I mean, nostalgia is perfectly fine.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah, as long as you recognize that, that was one shift, and there's, today's shift, and there's tomorrow's shift, and you can't control when you were born, but it's all of these shifts and all of these eras really contribute to an ongoing language.
Yeah.
And a language of culture, a language of music.
I guess my overall point with that was there something special about that, your particular entry point, especially how it relates to the underground, and all of a sudden you're at a major label where all of a sudden you're empowered to give this underground scene a voice in the mainstream. Was there something special about that moment as far as being there?
Well, I mean,
that you can kind of give.
What was really important about it was sort of the honesty and the visceral nature of the music that I grew up on, and I came into it, or I came into working at labels, in that sort of post Nirvana gold rush, when everyone was looking for quote unquote the next Nirvana.
And you had resources.
And, well, I just had history. I had a history with a lot of these people.
Yeah.
I mean, the first band I ever signed was a band from Washington, D.C. called Jawbox. And, brilliant band. I was lucky enough to make 2, I think, really great records with them. But, I knew that band because my friend Jay, who played bass in Government Issue, was the singer and guitar player. And I've always been a fan of everything he's done. When I was in a position to sort of cherry pick, I think some of the best of the underground, Jawbox really was one of those bands. And they were also creating quite a stir on their own. They already had 2 records out in Discord, both of which were great. Both of which showed, tremendous playing and songwriting chops. And I think, the first record I did with them, which is a record called For Your Own Special Sweetheart, really was the record where it all kind of came together. Their sound, was at once inviting and strident. And it was probably not completely, ready for the mainstream.
Well, I think there's kind of a through line when I look at some of the bands you signed there. They all seem to have an accessibility, but it doesn't, maybe with Bad Religion kind of being in their own kind of atmosphere.
Bad Religion was its own beast.
By the way, for people that are listening, we're at the Century Media offices right now. We're surrounded. I think we have like gold records. I think we have a pound of cocaine over there, champagne. Dancing ladies.
Come
They're doing
on.
business is great.
I'm from Boston, okay? I'm from Boston, and we don't do those. We don't do those things there.
There's no crime in Boston. Everyone knows that.
Correct.
They don't party. They don't party. All right. I think we were talking about Bad Religion and then being in their own sphere, kind of separate. But I think there was a niche sensibility to some of these bands, and it was like in a way, I'm actually amazed that you were able to get bands like that the platform. Like, what was, I guess now with having all your experience working at labels at different levels in terms of independent, major, reflecting now, what was it like working at a major label? Was it markedly different?
It was a completely different time.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, we were in this, this world that was sort of looking for the next Nirvana.
Yeah.
That.
Is that what you felt though when you were signing a Jawbox or a Civ? Were you thinking, all right, we're trying to get that big hit?
It varies band from band. The one thing, I think a lot of us naively assumed then was okay, the doors have been kicked down.
So it's just where this it's getting that to happen is a lot easier now.
Let the riffraff run rampant.
But I also feel like back then you'd have a record sell 200,000 or 300,000 copies and it was seen as a failure. Is that true?
That wasn't quite true. I mean,
you know better than I do.
I think like you would bands that were highly touted, that got great press, but maybe didn't connect with the mainstream.
Yeah.
But the numbers that they were selling at that point were 20 to 40,000.
Okay.
And that was especially for a sort of a highly regarded signing, or something that came from the underground, like the Melvins are a great example of that. Like the Melvins are a band that have been around for a very long time and will be around for a very long time. They're definitely not for mainstream consumption.
No, I would never assume that the Melvins sold more than like 100,000 copies of any record. I could be wrong.
I think it was like 50 or 60,000 records, but it's funny because at the same time, they sold enough records to validate the money that was being put into them, and they're a great artist magnet as well.
I would say this: if you can sell 10,000 of anything, right? 10,000 widgets, 10,000 doodads, then that's enough to warrant some type of business structure around you.
Yeah, I mean, if you affect that many people on a certain level, like you're probably starting to do something right. When you start affecting hundreds of thousands to millions of people, you've tapped in. You've mystically tapped into a consciousness that very few people do.
Yeah, listen, I can definitely attest to that. To getting the point to where God forbid was selling over that 50,000 threshold, and especially when you start to see that penetrate in a global sense. So we went from doing that and then selling, I think our Constitution of Treason sold like 10,000 records just in the UK. And you see all of a sudden the press steps up and these all these different doors open. And I feel like we were just under that threshold of getting to the next level where all the other doors open. But you see it in kind of tangible real world connections, and kind of in a way now that I have a credibility to this day, or people will give me a certain amount of credit just based on kind of penetrating to whatever level, how modest it was.
Yeah, I mean, and God forbid was like a very legit, credible band coming from a very legit, credible background. I mean, it's interesting how you guys came up alongside bands like Thursday, Nora, Dillinger,
Candiria.
Yep. So, and you were sort of another sort of tributary off that river.
Well, the funny thing is, if you look at it from a more regional standpoint, what we were doing seemed like, oh, that's what all these bands were doing. But in New Jersey, no one was doing what we were doing. Really, the band that we pivoted off of was a band called For the Love Of, but they were more of a groovy, very dynamic, evil sounding hardcore band in the vein of like Overcast or something like that.
Yeah.
But so anyway, we're not here to talk about God forbid.
Okay.
We're here to talk about Mike Gitter.
Oh God.
That's right.
So
what happened with Warner where you ended
Atlantic,
the other Warner. What happened with Atlantic where that ended up you end up not working there?
I mean, I think I had a good run there. I was there for 5 years.
That is a good run.
Had bands that were critical successes like Jawbox, who went on to be a fairly influential band. You still hear the Deftones covering Savory. Having had real success with Bad Religion,
of course,
which was the second band I ever signed / worked with, and with Bad Religion, I caught them at a point where the scene that they sort of that they spearheaded and helped reinvent, was exploding in its own right.
Yeah.
You had a tentpole record like Dookie, and that was sort of, in a lot of ways, that was like the next step from Nevermind.
They took the mantle for sure.
Yeah, they definitely took the mantle, and Bad Religion was an extremely important band in the development of both punk and alternative music. When they put out a record called Suffer in 1987, that completely rejuvenated punk rock in Southern California. It's a great record. It has an energy and a depth to it that very few records around that point had, and the subsequent it got a little bit of attention at first, but with subsequent records like No Control, Generator, Against the Grain, they really kind of like helped define and foster a sound, and inspire bands like Pennywise, inspire The Offspring, inspire NoFX, all of whom became very important bands in their own right. And I was lucky enough to catch Bad Religion at a point where they were on their own independent label, Epitaph. Most of I think the band wanted to see how the other half lived. They also wanted to take advantage of what a major could do for them, and they signed to Atlantic. And I think it was actually a pretty good, at least for the first couple records. It was a really good relationship. The first record Atlantic put out was a reissue of the Recipe for Hate record, and I know we ended up selling like, we ended up adding to their numbers quite a bit, and we're able to sort of push them actually to places that they probably would have gone on their own right anyway. But when they did Stranger Than Fiction, and had bona fide radio hits like Infected, like Bad Religion, Green Day, Social Distortion, the Chili Peppers, were all great examples of bands who came from an underground. The Beastie Boys even were all great examples of bands that came from an underground background that either wrote songs that struck a chord with a mainstream audience, or had a vibe about them, which was then was sort of alchemized into songs.
Well, I would say that those bands are institutions, and certain bands, once you reach a certain iconic status, and sometimes I think it goes a little bit just beyond the numbers of it, but
they became institutions. I guess the question is like, what makes an institution? Ultimately, it's its ability to sort of connect on a whether it be an intellectual level or a primal level or an emotional level, and it's rare. It's totally rare that happens, and those are bands that did it. And there's some bands that do it from a songwriting perspective, and that's where you get bands like the Stone Temple Pilots, or Alice in Chains, who just wrote who were great bands who had a great had great sounds.
Yeah. So I kind of want to pivot a little bit to your time at Roadrunner Records.
Sure.
I think people, at least in my world, that's where we're most familiar with your work, or where your name became something synonymous with, especially a Roadrunner. I think in terms of label branding, perhaps for a time had the strongest brand in heavy music.
Yeah, heavy music and ultimately hard rock.
Yeah, and I think there was just something, especially being in a signed band who was not on Roadrunner, and got to tour with a lot of Roadrunner bands, and being fans of those bands. There was something there was a mystique, I think, about that label from the outside looking in. How did you get involved with Roadrunner, and what was that like, just kind of getting going there?
Well, again, you hang out in a certain world, whether you're a journalist or an A&R person or just simply a fan, and you meet other journalists, A&R persons, and ultimately we're all fans anyway. So what happened was, I had known Monty Connor for years, and I had also I like way before I had even worked at Atlantic. As a journalist, I remember going out to lunch with him, and him handing me Trapon and Paul cassettes, early copies of Sepultura's Schizophrenia or Beneath the Remains, and just having and as the years went by, Monty and I developed an incredible mutual respect for each other. He's still one of my best friends. I think truly a great record guy as well. And at the time, about 1997, there was an A&R guy at Roadrunner named Howie Abrams, who now actually does a fantastic podcast called Merciless, and also has a publishing company called Lesser Gods Books, and which is incidentally run with the former owner of Roadrunner, a guy named Cees Wessels. Mm-hmm. But Howie was leaving Roadrunner and sort of heading off into the world of publishing. So I was out of Atlantic at the time, and I was looking for a gig. And Roadrunner was one of the first places I wanted to go. I mean, I loved the vibe of the label. I loved a lot of the bands that they had.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're coming from one label, and there was a certain type of through line of the style of bands you were signing, as far as from my perspective.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to a new label, are they saying, "Hey, we sign these kinds of bands, and we need you to sign these kinds of bands," or was it a little more open to your tastes?
Well, I think over the 5 years I was at Atlantic, one thing I learned how to do was make records, and learning how to hire basically.
So I
go through the demoing. Sorry.
So this is so I think this is really interesting to the people listening to this, because I know you don't want to get into all the nitty gritty of what it is to be an A&R, but what does that mean to you making records, as far as how you're involved with the bands you work with?
I think making quote unquote making records. I think at the end of the day, it's about getting the best out of an artist, and creating the best sort of listening experience for a fan.
Now, is that a songwriting thing? Like, will you weigh in and tell a band, "Hey, I don't think this vibe is working," or this types of songs, or in terms of the critical mind? Or
it's all of the above. It's really to me, you're working with people, you're working with talent, you're working with vision and desire, and it's really about getting the best out of someone. And sometimes that is on a very very specific songwriting end of things, where you basically, where let's say a band hands in a collection of songs that just aren't good,
Yeah, and you'll tell them.
Or I mean,
you'll say, "Hey, you're not ready."
Let's say it's nowhere near as good as the record that came before it. Let's say it seems rushed. Let's say like they weren't completely focused on they weren't completely focused on making a great record. They were focused on getting a record done in time for a tour.
Do you find in your historically butting heads with bands over issues like these?
Yeah. Hopefully it's all in the interest of it's all in a common interest. Mm-hmm. Do you butt heads? Absolutely. Again, you're dealing with ego, and you're dealing with artists.
Of course.
And nobody likes to be told like that the thing that you created is not like the greatest. This is not the greatest song you've ever written in your life.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that.
And it's all subjective as well.
It's totally subjective. Well, you may not think this, but 5 of my friends think this. Well, 5 of your friends are just giving you lip service. And by the way, I'm not always right.
Yeah.
And on many occasions, I've after listening to something for a week or 2 weeks, I'm like, you may have a point there, or you may have created something that I didn't get at first. It's interesting. One thing I always say is one of the greatest things that any person in the music business, but particularly A&R people, need to do is just listen. I've always believed that listening is life, and the more time you spend with something, the more you sort of get into the crux of it. The more you understand it, the more you can often discover within a piece of music.
Yeah.
And and sometimes things are great, and sometimes things are not great. And I think your goal as an A&R person is to, really come with a piece of music that is great, that will affect many people, and hopefully sell many records.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why I'm really interested in these questions is, with my experience, God forbid, was in a way left to our own devices in terms of creating our music. Sometimes we would send demos, but sometimes I don't think we even did a lot of demoing in the early years. And the A&R side would, I guess, have a more of a hand in, finding the artists to do the artwork and kind of just work on each step of the project. The only time we got really hands-on was Tom B., the guy who signed us. He signed Shadows Fall over here, and he was really involved in the Constitution album. Like, he actually came to the studio and is actually giving us notes on the mix and ideas, and just really involved. So in a way, I personally, as an artist, even though you do want to have that creative control, I also think that I like having people invested in what you're doing and saying, hey, I want to take an active role in making this the best it can be. Like, for example, if we make a record and I'm not sure, I'm so in it, I don't know what the single is. I want some feedback. Say, hey, what do you guys think the single should be? And just little things like that. Yeah,
and I think also, anytime a band signs to a label, it's a partnership, and that's something that I think myself and a lot of really good A&R people over the years take that relationship and that partnership very seriously. And I think that you want to, you're also ultimately the person who knows the artist, who should be know the artist the best, know them artistically the best, and be able to properly convey their vision and their ideas to your label. So I think and also anytime you sign a band, you do it because you love it. You do it because you love the music and it affects you on some level. And your job ultimately is to convey that to your label, and also being an intense super fan. Ultimately A&R people in many cases become like super fans of the bands they're working with and get to know them intimately.
Well, you would hope so. You would hope that the people that sign you are really invested. We always hear those horror stories of some bands signing to a major label and then half the label gets fired. So then they're left with people there who are not passionate about what they do, and no artist wants to be in that scenario. And that's usually when those situations go sideways. An artist, needs their rabbi, needs their team, needs their people who are going to sort of, hopefully guide them to the promised land. And the next time I get a record deal, I'm like, I need a rabbi, guys.
You need a rabbi, dude. You need a rabbi.
So all right. So you're at Roadrunner now. You worked with a lot of bands there, but I'm more interested in the bands that you signed that were relatively small or unknown entities, because obviously you signed Opeth, you signed Megadeth, Hatebreed, some bands that were pretty well established. But I'm always more fascinated by the origin story. So
which is always more, but at the same time, taking an established band that you're hopefully a super fan of, and developing a relationship with them where either in their own right or because you've become involved in their process, you make a career defining record.
Yeah.
I in many ways, especially at Roadrunner, I definitely lucked out. Cradle of Filth's Nymphetamine is a landmark record.
They finally had good sounding records.
They finally had a good sounding record, and they also finally wrote great songs.
Yeah.
And, regardless of whatever background, whether it be thrash, metal, black metal, that band came from.
Hey, don't be hating on Midian.
I love Midian. But, Nymphetamine was the record where everything just came together. And that was a case of like working very closely with the producer, Rob Caggiano.
Yeah, I heard he talked a lot about that on the Josta podcast and how he got them to play in a room together and not just make like a computer record. I thought that was amazing. I love that approach.
Yeah, he got the best out of that band. And he got them to realize like what they could be.
Yeah.
So you have very involved situations like that. Then a band like Opeth just drops Ghost Reveries in your lap.
Well, I mean, Ghost Reveries and Watershed, to me, in a way, I feel like they had two peaks. Well, maybe, you know what? Here's the thing with Opeth. They're so good, it's kind of difficult to put a pin in any one high point because
they move from strength to strength.
Yeah, so I'm not going to overstate that because I can imagine all the tweets of people, hey, man, that ain't the best. Blackwater Park's the best, or Still Life, or Damnation.
You know how you are an Opeth record? You
just hang back.
You basically you fly to Sweden.
You got to fly to Sweden?
A couple times, yeah. Fly to Sweden.
I want to be an A&R guy. Go to Sweden.
Well, at the time, A&R budgets were bigger.
There you go.
You basically go to Sweden. You get on a train. You go to a studio in a town called Örebro.
Oh, I know that.
Yep.
With Mr. Jens Bogren.
With Jens Bogren.
By the way, Jens Bogren mixed the last two God Forbid albums, mixed and mastered, did a great job.
Yep. Yes, he did. And you basically sit down, they play it back for you. You don't even know what to say because it's so damn good. You
just start crying.
And you're just like, okay, cool. So I can put my name up, like I get that little credit. Like I can like the microscopic, A&R credit. Cool. All right, I'm in. And those records are just like acts of providence in their own right.
Yeah.
Even working with Megadeth, which to me was a great.
So which records did you do?
The two records I worked on with them were United Abominations
and Endgame.
And Endgame.
Two of their, I think of the later records, those are the two best of up until the Dystopia, which is fucking awesome. But those are. And I would United Abominations. I like probably a little more than Endgame, but I think you like Endgame more, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Endgame. United Abominations, I think has some great songs, and I think that. Well, actually, the funny thing is there was a record before that. The System Has Failed.
Yeah, also very good. Which underrated.
Which is the underrated gem in the Megadeth catalog.
Yeah, but I think the thing that, and you talked a little bit before about linking up bands with the right producers, getting Andy Sneap involved. Yeah. I think was something that was lacking from the 13 and the what was the other the previous one? I forget the last
World was it? Oh, no, Super Collider.
Those two records. There's such a sonic difference.
Yeah, I think,
and I just think Andy Sneap was the right guy for the right time.
Andy was the right guy who was enthused about being there, who really won. Dave Mustaine is a genius in his own right. That's indisputable.
I would have to agree with that.
And he whether it be Max Norman or God, who else has he worked?
I think Johnny K did those other records.
Yeah, working with Megadeth was really an exercise in getting the it goes to what I was saying before. It was an exercise in getting the best out of an artist, and really seeing that artist connect with why he's great.
Yeah.
And I think over the course of those two records especially, that happened. And also, and part of what I do is also create an atmosphere for creative success, and bringing Andy into the equation, a true fan. Somebody who learned to play, probably learned to play guitar, jamming to,
Rust in Peace and Peace Cells and
Well,
all
I was
that.
about to say, yeah, probably more peace
Peace
cells.
Cells, yeah.
Helping a career artist make a career defining record, I think is also an important part of things right now. It's funny. I mean, I'm currently in the middle of a body count record, and working with Body Count, Ice-T, the producer Will Putney, at this time and place in the band's growth and development, and at this time and place in just the world itself, they're on the verge of making their best record, and to me that's enormously gratifying.
Yeah, and me being Mike actually brought me into the fold to help contribute a song to the Body Count record, and I know there's some other songwriters, some other people, and I think that year, and I think when I guess with a band like that, you get to have more of an active role in making the record. Is that correct?
Well, I think to me, the best, some of the greatest artists are probably some of the most open and generous.
Yeah.
They're some of the greatest artists are the ones that say, let's show me an idea, let's collaborate on this, let's grow together. And what I found in terms of walking into a Body Count record was, I think that Ice and the band wanted some input from the community. I think they wanted people to join them in their journey, and it so happens that it's happened at a very extreme time for this country.
Yeah.
And I think that record, it's not Rage Against the Machine record, but that echoes across this record.
Well, he's someone, and I was talking about this with someone the other day. He is someone not only that has a place as a musician, has a place as an actor and a celebrity, but he's one of the people whose voice matters historically.
Well,
and in pop culture, like I said, if they do a documentary about the LA riots, there's going to be a part of that where Ice-T has a role in that, and his voice carries weight in a way that, like I said, it is part of it. There's a historical context, and there is also a pop culture a component that is unique, really unique. There's not very many people.
There's no. I mean, honestly, there's very few artists like him. And like you were just saying, his is a voice. I was going to say voice of a generation, but I think his, it's not so.
Songbird of a generation.
It's not so much.
It's one, but it spans more than a generation.
It's a voice. It's a voice that shaped culture.
No, I actually was really interested in some of the other bands. So I'm gonna go to some bands. You tell me whether you signed them or not. Glassjaw.
Yes.
Ill Nino.
Yes.
Killswitch Engage.
Yes.
Trivium.
No, but I was involved in their signing and co-A&Ring.
So there are situations at Roadrunner where multiple people will be involved in terms of working with a band or signing a band.
Well, I mean, Monty and I were very close.
Yeah.
Monty, like I said, Monty Connor is one of my best friends, and he was very busy at the time. He was the head of A&R at the label. So on many projects, he and I would work together.
Yeah.
And it was a good way of sort of pooling our individual talents and outlooks, and it was just fun. Again, working with your friends.
So the thing that really fascinates me though about, because as my musical taste, this kind of streak of bands or that label definitely is more aligned with my taste. So obviously I'm gonna have a more of a connection to that. But I was just always fascinated with people that can see a band in its raw state where they're not, Glassjaw became a great band, but by my estimation, they did not start as a great band. They were very rough around the edges. And I remember playing them. God forbid did a show. It was Converge, Glassjaw, when they were still on their EP, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang record, Buried Alive. God forbid we played in Queens. And I remember and I think they had already signed the Glassjaw. They had already signed the Roadrunner deal, but obviously the record wasn't done. So I don't think they were even really playing those songs, very rough around the edges. But it was always amazing to me though for someone to be able to have that vision of like, I can kind of see the greatness in this rough state, and that's why it's always more fascinating to me of taking the band from ground zero as opposed to more established.
To me, the common denominator in most of the music, in probably like 98.5% of the music I like, is there's a visceral and human element to it, and Glassjaw, Glassjaw conveyed that in spades. They, there are there's some great players in that band. Daryl Palumbo, was coming from such a place of honesty, and so wanted to convey, what was in his head, heart, and guts, that what Glassjaw was doing was undeniable. The thing I think that was interesting about Glassjaw was, to a certain extent, they were making music that was almost without context. And I think that was an issue. That was an issue that.
What do you mean by without context?
Without context, because at the time, what was Glassjaw?
I think in many sense they are the classic definition of a post-hardcore band, where they were in a band called Sons of Abraham, where most of the guys. There's even a song on the first Roadrunner, Everything You Want to Know About Silence, it's from the Sons of Abraham record, and
sure.
Essentially they just had Daryl write new lyrics and write new vocals on top of it. So there is a definitive connection with that world.
They were the perfect. In some ways, they were like this great combination of New York hardcore, Washington D.C. post-hardcore, and just their own kind of ambition and madness.
Well, one thing I realized after the fact, that because I didn't have the musical depth at the time, was that how much Daryl was influenced by HR from Bad Brains.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's that there. He's also very extremely influenced by Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he again, a true music fan, who let his influences seep in and create something that was like new, and began a conversation that eventually spoke to millions of kids.
Yeah. Well, to me that's the in a way for me, because I was also in that scene from the ground floor, because we were friends with them and got to be that. Me and my brother went to the mixing and got to, because Steve Evans was mixing with Ross Robinson, so we got to hear stuff before it came out. So I was really kind of a fly on the wall while that stuff was developing. But the most interesting about it was, and a lot of people don't realize this now, is that it didn't really hit right away. That was one of those bands where they almost hit a wall, and then that record built a following in between. It was like that whole scene blew up almost in between the two records. That's a classic case of a record that just was so good it found its own audience. Yeah.
And it's interesting because when the record came into Roadrunner, the general reaction from some of the people running the label was, this is extremely good. We don't know exactly what to do with it, and the only band that we can actually reference to it is Vision of Disorder.
Well, Deftones, I think.
And Deftones as well.
Because it wasn't nearly. I don't think you. Vision of Disorder was much heavier.
Yeah, it wasn't as frenetic or as heavy as VOD, but a lot of the same sort of DNA was there.
Of course. The Long Island connection.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that people didn't. I think people didn't know how to market it. What do you do with this? Because it's its own beast. And also, I think truth be told, those are the bands that shape culture. Mm-hmm. That's where you get the Rage Against the Machines and Nine Inch Nails and Skrillex, Refused, Metallica. The bands that are sort of the biggest, quote unquote what the fucks, I think in many ways can be some of the most important bands.
Yeah. Well, I think with them they were ahead of their time, mm-hmm. and not only they're ahead of their time, but they did something that resonated in a way where you listen to the records now and it doesn't feel dated. It actually feels very still vibrant, and that's the thing you can't define in the moment, you know. Sorry, so
there's a lot of bands that probably owe them a lot of debt, and probably maybe even some royalties.
Did the Used rip them off? I don't know.
I would say,
or is it like, was it parallel thinking?
I wouldn't say it was parallel thinking, but it was continuing the conversation.
Okay.
You know, it was here's this really, you know, galvanizing record, everything you ever wanted to know about Silence. And it really seeped into the conversation for many bands. The Used is a great example of that. Finch was another great example of that.
That's what I was going to say. And now Let Live, I think, is probably the biggest thing you could connect to it.
But the thing that's great about, you know, that conversation was everybody added their own spice to it.
Well, the Used, I have to say, and I think it's objectively hard to say that the Used was definitely doing something that was much more palatable and wrote more, I'd say, directly tuneful songs. Like you didn't have to do much work.
Yeah, Glassjaw's agenda was never let's, you know, let's appeal to everybody.
Yeah.
Their agenda was let's like get this bile that's in our guts out musically. And you know that I think that influenced people who were ultimately probably better songwriters or more commercially minded songwriters. And that's where you get a Used record going, you know, gold. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember if that.
I'm sure they have a platinum record.
I'm sure there's a platinum record there as well. Finch going gold. But what's interesting is.
And Glassjaw never went gold.
Yeah, but you know what? Give me
Worship and Tribute never went gold?
No, it didn't.
That's amazing to me.
But you know what? Give me those records now, and I still get that same chart. You know, give me those Glassjaw records now, and I still get that charge out of them. And I think, you know, that again.
That's why I'm kind of bummed they stopped working with Ross, because I think he was able to kind of capture something, and because they put out a couple of EPs since then are a little too lo-fi for my tastes. But yeah, they definitely hit. You know, sometimes it just works.
Yeah, I mean, look. Also, you know, it's where the band is at the time. It's where the artist is at the time, and also it's just, you know, Ross Robinson was somebody who was able to capture their truth.
Yeah. You
know, and capture their truth and really magnify their truth.
Yeah. So all right, so let's move on to another band, Killswitch Engage. Did you envision the kind of global success and impact that band would have?
No, I just thought that their early demos and the first Ferret record were, you know, just became some of my favorite music I was hearing at the time. You know, Killswitch Engage was really a combination of the tunefulness and technique of a band like Carcass, the stomp of the Cro-Mags, and the earnesty and spiritual quest of emotional hardcore. You know, and that I shouldn't even say emotional hardcore because, well, that 99% of that music is extremely emotional.
Yeah. Well, I think they might be the most. I think what they did, and the thing is, Mike D sent me and my brother the demo, the demo.
It was undeniable.
Well, you know, when we heard it, it actually, and by the demo, so for people listening to this would be the demo that came out before Alive or Just Breathing, and it had Numbered Days, Fixation on the Darkness, and then the title track was on the demo, and it had a very similar production to the album, which was leaps and bounds above the self-titled debut, which a lot of people probably don't even know about the record that came out before that on Ferret Records.
I mean, when I heard Temple from the Within, it was such a combination of just emotion, intensity, and melody. It was really the blueprint for, you know, and the kernel of, or the seed of what Killswitch Engage grew into. But it was the most just essential, you know, to me it was one of the most essential pieces of music I was hearing at the time, because it was just like, whoa, there's, you know, this is gripping. This is gripping. This is.
Well, what I was gonna say was we heard the demo, and in a way, and it was after Determination, but before Gone Forever, and it was we were already thinking in a certain what we want our next record to be, and we heard it in a way we felt like we got kicked off our corner, and in a way where we were like, this is it, like this is the next thing, and we have to kind of figure out what we're going to do because it's going to be so undeniable when this comes out that it's going to change everything. And I still think today, if you look at what happened after that, they are probably the most copied metal band in terms of, because they laid out a formula of, all right, here's how the verse sounds. This is the kind of riffing you have. This is the kind of grooves. Here's how kind of production, everything, and the scream here, singing here. It was very easy to see what they did, and it was the copycats was insane. Even if it affected us even.
Well, I think the bottom line with Killswitch Engage is they wrote the best songs.
Yeah.
And one thing that's kind of undeniable is whoever writes the best songs is going to win.
Write that down, everyone.
There's a reason. Well, there's a reason why
it's true.
Iron Maiden is a global juggernaut. There's a reason why Metallica, is even on records you don't like. So there's stuff on those records that's undeniable.
Some people just have it.
Yeah,
they have it.
And some combinations of people have it as well. Whether it's Hetfield Ulrich or Mike D and Adam Duckowitz. There's combinations that just produce that change the course of a genre.
Yeah. No, I think it's amazing, and I think just when I think about you, knowing you, and these records you've worked on, these bands, like I said, you got in on the ground floor, and to me, it's a testament to you being able to see something that perhaps, because I think Century Media wanted to sign Killswitch. I think Tom B told me that
I think
he wanted to sign the band, and maybe there was an offer out, but obviously
there was.
So I think that's just a testament to your legacy, and or I don't know if you think about it that way.
Yeah, if I was to get that highfalutin and start
my legacy,
start fancying myself as some sort of seer, I'd be totally fucked.
Yeah,
it's really like.
It is a skill. There is a skill and a something. You don't think that's
instinctual. It's does it hit you in your guts? Does this song just soar?
Now, sometimes you have a band where you're like, all right, I'm feeling that thing, but I'm just not sure. I don't know if I can because at the end of the day, you're accountable. If something doesn't work, it comes like there is a clear kind of score sheet of some people. I can sit there and say, I think that band's great. I think this, but I'm not the one that has put my reputation on the line.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, look, and I think times are becoming more stringent, and I think that you have to be a lot more careful these days in terms of how you're spending money. But at the same time, you also have to kind of go, within reason, go with your gut.
So it is still a gut calculation, not a all right, I think this band will sell X, Y based on this and some.
I mean, you can be sitting in a room, with 1,000 people going nuts over a local band, and go, they're affecting this local audience in a way.
So even if it doesn't necessarily speak to your personal taste, you're kind of just recognizing something that is just happening, and you have to be attuned to it.
Yeah, of course. Obviously the band has to be legit, and it has to be something. The music has to be great.
Yeah, it's not just they're handing out Kool-Aid and everything.
Correct. But at the same time, yeah, if you see that kind of reaction, that's probably worth pursuing.
Yeah.
At the same time, if a piece of music just strikes you in your gut, and the songs are great, and there's something to develop there, there's a reason to get involved.
Yeah.
And things like projects like that sometimes are developmental and sometimes never get beyond the demo stage. and sometimes they make absolutely incredible, successful records.
Yeah. So I don't know if I call it the demise of Roadrunner Records, but certainly the transition where Roadrunner was bought by Warner.
Yes.
Are you allowed to talk about any of that? Are you okay with talking about how and that stuff?
Ask me some questions, and I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'll either say like.
So, was that situation where they were acquired? Do you know the thought process behind getting rid of a lot of the original Roadrunner staff?
No.
No. So it wasn't like a situation where they explained certain things to you, or is it just something you don't want to elaborate on?
I won't elaborate.
Okay.
What I will say, Roadrunner was acquired by Warner's, largely on the strength of its brand, of its culture, and the success of Slipknot. I think a lot of majors were looking at that band, going, "Ooh, we want that." And
but to me, there's something beyond that, and I think what is unique to Roadrunner was a consistency, and to me there was like a Roadrunner standard. Like, all right, this is a Roadrunner band. Like, and all right, we're gonna have Sepultura, and they're gonna do something culturally viable. We're gonna have Fear Factory come out, and they're gonna do something that's never existed. And it's gonna have a certain sound, and it's going to speak to a certain crowd, to the point where I feel like there was a certain era where Roadrunner put something out, there were people who would buy it, especially in Europe, almost sight unseen, because they were like, this brand means something, and they've given me Burn My Eyes, and they've given me, Roots, and Alive or Just Breathing, and Ascendancy, and I know, and obviously Slipknot and stuff like that. And to me, them having that kind of exodus of people that work there and the infrastructure. Some like now, I don't know if the label carries that same thing, even though they've signed some really cool bands. They've kind of almost gone back to the hardcore roots lately, signing. Was it Turnstile?
Code Orange.
Yeah, they've gone even King 810 is pretty gritty and it's not like, oh, we're trying to sign some.
And looking at it as an outsider, I think that there's a definite interest and agenda from Warner's on high to maintain that brand and to keep it viable, even if
But I wouldn't say, and like I said, this is no disrespect to anyone over there. I know Dave Rath, awesome guy,
great guy, great record
and
guy.
I think there are signing cool bands, but I wouldn't say I've heard a record and be like, oh, that's the next. That's going to mean what Roots is going to mean. That's going to mean what Demanufacture means. That's going to mean what Iowa means.
Yeah, and I think the what the reason for that were two people, Monty Connor, a pure fan who ultimately learned the music business, and Case Wessels, who pushed us.
Who's Case?
Case was the owner of the label, and he was I think he's probably now late 70s, early 80s. He was a guy who has been in the Dutch music business for years, who was there sort of at the birth of heavy rock, who I think worked early records from bands like Blue Cheer and Deep Purple, and who really pushed us for great bands with original visions, and often larger than life personalities with great songs.
So he had a big hand in creatively what ended up being that brand.
Yeah, I mean, he was the owner, and he was
even into the later years to the Triviums and
yeah, I mean because it was all about like how does I think in his mind he wanted us to bring him bands that sort of broke the mold, that had personalities that could carry that music further. Consider the cast of characters that came out of Roadrunner. Everything from Peter Steele to Dino Cazares, Max Cavalera, Rob Flynn, Daryl Palumbo, Adam Duckowitz, the Matt Heafy. like these are all like fairly dynamic and extremely talented people.
Yeah.
And or King Diamond. If you really want to go into the history of Roadrunner,
Chuck Schuldiner.
oh yeah, that was Combat.
Roadrunner didn't put out any death records.
At least they probably licensed
See
some of the death catalog, but that was Combat.
I'm gonna get eviscerated on the internet.
No, you're not. we can only retain so much knowledge.
Listen, I have to just cheat on Google and use all that stuff.
Yeah, me too. But at the same time, like, you had these like just outsized characters making great music, and I think it was Case who always had a big vision for what he wanted to do, bumping into Monty, who was just a true fan, who was also part of a developing scene and knew it intimately.
Well, so your tenure at Roadrunner ends, and this is...
It's 12 years.
12 years. That's
which is an amazing run at any job.
Well, it's I think being in any career endeavor for that period of time, especially something like that was so definitive. What this show is really about is kind of those in between times. Mm-hmm. And what really interests me is you're done at Roadrunner. Was that like a soul searching period, or like figuring out like what was going through your mind is like what's next?
Well, again, that's the answer. What's next? What do I do next? How do I continue doing what I love to wake up every day doing? Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a thought to like, all right, I'm done with music, or you were definitely...
How can you be? It's like...
Well, we know people that have.
Yeah. And it's like they say, music... You don't choose music. Music chooses you.
But you went to Century Media right away after that, right?
Yeah, I probably went to Century Media initially... Yeah, probably a good like 3 months after that.
So you don't stay out of work long. I think this man is in high demand.
That's for other people to say.
I'm just putting together like you were here for a little bit. People snatch you up. You don't stay.
I think I have had I think I've had longevity for a number of reasons. I think that for one, I kind of know how to make a record, which is probably not as as in many ways not as common a skill as it once was.
Well, now I think you have situations now where, or from what I've heard, where you have all these baby bands that get signed, and sometimes the labels aren't giving them virtually anything to record with. So they're just like, hey, go do your thing, make a record. However you got to do it, get some duct tape and...
Yeah, but what? Here's the thing. As an A&R person, to me, even when you have a small budget, it's like how do we make the best possible record, on fumes? You know what I mean? How do we take the length that's in our pocket, and create a record that hopefully a lot of people that will excite a lot of people and begin a career.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is today we have a lot more musicians who are saying, all right, we don't have the money, so we have to become producers.
Sure.
We have to learn the craft, which I think is great. I think self-independence is, and not having to rely. But I do think that idea of the producer's role and being able to, God forbid, getting to work with a Steve Evans on our first record, in a way is, to me, the reason why we have a career.
Well, I think it's important to always have that outside voice. I think, it being, for individuals who've known each other since childhood, who love each other and hate each other and get on each other's nerves, but, still want to hang out and still want to, creatively move forward. I think you sometimes need that voice or referee. Yeah,
but that's my point. I don't know if that happens as much anymore because people are recording on their own and they don't. I think there's for example, like Code Orange.
Yeah.
To me, without a Kurt Ballou putting that, what they do,
creating the landscape.
There's a prism to which we're hearing that, like in a way where I'd say hardcore records today sound great, and that used to be a rare thing. You know, when you'd hear a progression through Unlearning, or you hear Leeway, you know, you hear that Normandy production, it was like, whoa, that was almost a sign that the band was official and they were legit. But I just, you know, because people are doing so much recording on their own, and listen, I think some people do great productions on their own.
I think you know we're kind of at a point where just because you have the technology to do it, or you have the means to do something to you know create, doesn't mean you're going to be awesome at it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, to me, one of the things I think that's diluted, you know, what we do is just there's too much, you know,
too much of everything.
There's too much of everything. You know, it's like you have to, in some ways you have to sort of wade through, you know, I think a Tower of Babel, to isolate and identify stuff that's great.
I've definitely, this year in particular, because I was writing for VH1 last year, so I had an impetus to actually listen to new music. Like in a way, I was like you, where listening to new music was part of my job, and I have been writing that for them this year. So there's been almost arm's length as far as finding new music, and it's felt, to be honest, like work to have to wait. Like I felt like I wasn't listening to new music because I wanted to. I was listening to new music because I felt like I was supposed to.
Well,
and it was like there's a fatigue about it for me.
Again, you know, because there's so much music, which, you know, in a way I think is great. Like I think what home production and what the internet has done is effectively put a guitar in everybody's hands. Now, should everybody have a guitar in their hands? Probably not. But the cream, the cream rises to the top, and you know some great things can, great music. There's always going to be great music. There's always going to be inspired individuals. There's always going to be like a furthering of the dialogue, in the conversation, of whether it be hard rock, metal, pop, EDM, you know, whatever the genre or subgenre is. I think one of the great things about now is that we live in this era where there's a much broader vocabulary to be spoken than ever.
Yeah. Well, kind of getting back to your story a little bit. So you went from CM to Razor and Tie for a little bit, and now back to CM. And
I also dabbled in management.
You've worn the other hat. So as a real X-Man, you've been there and back again by Bilbo Baggins. No, by Mike Gitter, and I'd say the through line, as far as, like I said, from the outside looking in, from Razor and Tie, I guess, now to Century Media and Another Century, which is the more rock branded new version of the label. You've been living more in that melodic commercial rock world. Is that a correct? Is that fair to say?
I think over the past few years, I've learned. You know, I've made a greater variety of records.
Yeah,
and I've worked with a number of different artists, and you know, I've always liked a lot of music.
Well, I don't want to keep you too much. I really appreciate you.
No, you're not.
You doing this. I just want to ask one more question.
Sure.
In this current environment where if just like you said, too much music, so much going on, and it's equally great and it's equally bad. Because there's so many musicians that listen to this, and that's really who I'm really speaking to, is I want there to be an educational component to this show. Is there mistakes you see, or things that you look for that you could tell people that might listen to this, that, or say maybe telling them what not to do is actually more informative? Or
own it. Own your creative stamp. Own your music. Own your promotion, own your social media. Basically, own your career. And some of the, a really good example of that was a band I signed at Razor and Tie called Starset. And when when I got the Starset music, it was fully realized. The songs were great. There was a vibe to it. There was a story behind it. Like everything was. They created their own universe, and created it like brilliantly. And when I went to see the band, they had a show that was unlike any, really unlike most bands. There was guys in spacesuits.
I did not know they wore spacesuits.
Like the guitar player and the bass player wear these sort of like crazy pressure suits, with basically welding masks modified to look like helmets. And it doesn't look cheesy. That's the crazy thing.
Well, that's the thing. I hear that, and I'm picturing something cheesy. So I have to look this up.
I mean, this and that's a band that like they own their career. Dustin, the singer and sort of main guy in the band, made special effort to basically create a sonic landscape, and create a show. And create something that was completely distinct that grabbed your attention, and that's why they became one of the biggest new rock bands, in America, and they now have a career. Other examples, like their website, looked like their website, which they created, had its own feel, had its own visuals, had its own story. Basically, the great thing about that band is they didn't let others do it for them. They did it themselves, and they did it to the highest quality that they could afford. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a prime example of, walk it, talk it, and own it, and and realize that you're there to make great music, to provide a show, to entertain people, and to give somebody a very legitimate reason to shell out, X amount for a physical record, which is becoming less and less the case. Pay for a download of the record, or simply stream the record. But also just as importantly, go and fork, plunk down your $20 to go see the band live. Maybe you'll even buy a T-shirt.
So when you see a band like that, and the way I feel like you describe them as being somewhat fully formed, mm-hmm. and not only from a musical standpoint, but the way they're putting out their image, all their aspects of their business. But what about when you encounter a band who maybe they're not fully formed? And they're kind of, you see all the stuff, but you're like, hey, maybe they don't totally have the image right, and maybe the songs aren't like, maybe they're like 80% there, but they just need some development, or they have all that stuff, but they're not well managed, and they don't have a great website, or things like that.
Show me you mean it. Show me that you're going to put on the best show. You're going to put on the best show you physically can. You're going to make the best music you physically can. Your demo is the highest quality for the kind of music that you're making.
Yeah.
You're working you're working your social media. You're connecting with fans, and you're doing all the work on your way to being a great band. Just show me you mean it. And I think, we've seen throughout the years, we've seen many bands. No band starts out perfectly. Right. I mean, Killswitch Engage was a perfect example of a band that, like, maybe everything wasn't firing on all cylinders the first time I saw them. And there was still...
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Were you at the River City Rampage show in Newark?
Yes, I was.
And they
played
opened,
first. Yeah.
And there was 50 people there in a stadium.
Yep,
And they did not sound great.
no, but there was the songs were still kind of crushing, and because I mean they played all the songs off that Number Days, Fixation of the Darkness.
Did they?
Yeah, or at least I believe.
I'm not saying you're not.
Yeah.
You're wrong. I just don't remember.
They definitely played all the stuff off the Ferret record.
Were they signed to that? Because that
Yeah.
was
they were signed at that point.
2001, the summer of 2001.
Yep, they were signed. They were freshly signed at that point.
Okay.
And they, as imperfect as they were, and occasionally as awkward as they were, there was still a vibe and a spirit and a great songwriting sense and just a thing that they put across that was uniquely theirs.
Yeah. It's funny. I think about that sometimes when maybe, all right, let's say we're a band and we're pretty good, but then you get signed by someone like Roadrunner, and then you get a good manager, and then you get a good booking agent. In some ways, is that almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that gives you the confidence to become a great band?
Yeah, I mean,
it's almost like one thing feeds the other. Like if that band never would have gotten all those other opportunities, they wouldn't be the great live band they are today and have that confidence and be able to exert themselves. Because some bands, and I've noticed this with some European bands especially, where they're great studio bands, like a band like Scar Symmetry, for example.
That's a good example.
Who was primarily a studio band, and I would go and watch like live footage. I still never seen them, unfortunately, but you'd watch live footage. And it was a little weird.
It was a little stiff. It's a little bit
didn't really, but it's not their fault. They just haven't got their reps in, and you got to go out and get your reps. You got to do your 10,000 hours, as it were. Like to me, an example would be Periphery, a studio band that was a studio band that had to figure out how to translate these things they had done so amazingly on a record, which is a record is a controlled environment.
Okay.
And then you go live and you're dealing every day with a different, harder to wrangle environment, and trying to translate that. There's a learning curve. And I think their learning curve took years, until their second or third record, where literally every time I've seen them, they sound better. Every time I see them, their performance is a lot more magnetic, and the confidence just grows. So,
well, I mean, here, I think a really good example of that is a band like, say, In This Moment, who they started off as basically a female-fronted metalcore band with some pretty good songs, and it took 4 albums for them to fully realize who they were. But every record they kept pushing forward. Every record, it was like, different songs, better songs, more fully realized, and they did the work.
Yeah.
And if there's a singular piece of advice I can give, it's literally just do the work. Nobody's gonna do it for you. And nobody can want it more than you.
Yeah.
And as an A&R person, I mean, we occasionally do get in those situations where I'm where you start to feel like, God, I feel like I'm pulling harder than some of the band members.
Yeah.
And
you never want to be in that situation.
You never want to be in that situation. I mean, over the 23 years I've done A&R, that's happened. That's probably happened a couple times, and it never ends up well. Like you need partners. You need people who are going to, if you're going to be the coach, they're going to run as hard as they can down the field.
I have a good kind of situation that's very similar to that, but it wasn't with our label. It was actually with our ex-manager, Dave Ciencio, the Rev, where after we did Determination, there was a lot of questioning, soul searching, like, is this, because, I think my point of view at the time, maybe some of us as well, was, is it worth doing if we can't be X thing. If it can't be at a certain level, and this was at the time when Shadows Fall and Lamb of God were getting played on MTV and their careers were exploding, and we're like, and I remember our manager, he had more faith in us than we had in ourselves at that point, and it helped us get through. And then eventually our confidence and enthusiasm rebounded. But sometimes you do need that pep talk, you know.
Yeah. You need. I mean, look. Part of our gig as well is to be that sort of galvanizing, motivating dude or dudette, who's going to basically help the artist realize not only who they are but what they can be. And yeah, sometimes it's hours of conversation and really getting to know the artist well. Sometimes it's a terse, tough love kind of conversation, tough love kind of phone call as well. And you just, your gig is to get the best out of the artist. And I think I think that the best managers, the best A&R people, the best sort of support, the best sort of support staff, create an atmosphere for success. And that can be the success of the business of the band. That can be creative success. That can be personal success. And that's the job.
Well, I think that just about puts a bow on it. You heard it here first. Get your shit together, people.
Yeah. You know the words. This is the voice of the voiceless. We have learned by making choices. After persecution and illusion, we have summoned this illusion to build our foundation on natural elements to preserve life.
So after all that Killswitch Engage talk, I figured I should play a little bit of that. That was a live version of Numbered Days from the Disarm the Descent special edition. If you bought the record, like I did, god damn it. Anyway, really want to thank Mike for coming on here. That guy's really busy. He works a lot. He has actual responsibilities, unlike people like me. So, you know, him taking his time and giving us that insight was amazing. I really, really enjoyed that. And I thought there's a lot of valuable stuff in there. So other industry types, you know, you want to get out here and spread the word about what you're doing, hit me up. And just want to thank all you guys. The show's doing great. The last couple episodes have really been picking up and getting a lot more attention. And people are hitting me up saying how much they're really enjoying it. So this is awesome. It's a lot of fun. So we're closing on the end of the year. I don't know how soon I'm going to get the next one up. You know, I know you guys are busy. You're doing stuff. You're drinking eggnog and shit and hanging around Yule logs. And I don't know, you're doing stuff. You're busy, you know. So I don't want to crowd you too much with Doc Coyle podcast, but I'm going home for the holidays. I'm going to try and get some people out on the East Coast that are a little bit harder to get over here. Like I said, I like to do them in person. Not the biggest fan of doing them over Skype or phone, even though I will if I have to. So also head over to iTunes, give me a rating, give me a comment. Even if you think I'm whack, you know, just go out of your way to be like, yo, motherfucker, you're corny, 1 star or no stars. All right, stop. You know, if you want to do that, that'll at least help my rankings, and then your boy will be on the charts. And you know, I'm trying to make it out here. Anyway, everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry New Year. All that shit. Mamba out.